To me, the first game is an absolute masterpiece, or damn near close to one at least. It just nailed exactly what it set out to do in many ways. Honestly, I didn't expect it to leave such an amazing impression on me, maybe because I had no real expectations when going into these at the time, just a lot of curiosity, I suppose. And well, I left that game pleasantly surprised. But now that I really know what I liked about the first game, I kinda have high standards on what I want to see get either carried over or improved with the sequel. Because of that, I did go into this follow up with a massive magnifying glass, just looking at everything I could to see how it stacked up. Safe to say, I was pretty damn hyped to jump into things already. Anyways, let's get into it. This is Combat Overview. Here we go over the general controls, their main mechanics, who or what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. So right off the bat, there's some changes. Our standard combo is already maxed out, even has a multi-hit ender, so it's no longer an upgrade anymore, but something we have by default. Not bad. Same for the crowd control spin. It's a starting move and a pretty damn good one. We actually have our own version of million stab and even a launcher too. Don't think we really needed it, but it's here now I guess. Our heavy attack is still this vertical swing, but now we can toss these out with less downtime. Plus it has its own shorter launcher where we keep our feet on the ground, and can even chain into our horizontal light attacks too. Not only that, but we get this hammer as a new weapon type. The usual thing where it swings slower, but hits harder. You can even swap between the two on the fly. So there's some interesting additions for sure. This could be a placebo effect, but since we have these multi-hit combos, seems like enemy HP was increased across the board. Probably so we can see this entire thing play out right. I don't know, it just comes off as mashing, I've noticed. In one, our moves had clear rolls and were very impactful. But now I can't shake this feeling that I'm flailing about. And it doesn't help that encounter design has taken a nosedive too. Won't take long to notice how most fights have us enter a circular arena where they'll flood the room for a while. So they'll just drop waves of cannon fodder enemies until the game allows us to move on. Definitely a far cry from having combat and platforming working hand in hand to create all sorts of different interactions. That's no longer the case here, it seems. Yeah, we're given more options, but we're also given less reasons to use any of them. It's just the complete opposite of what the previous game was about. Onto defenses, still have our tried and true shield. Like before, it'll lock you in place, but it snaps you to whichever direction an attack is coming from, so you don't have to aim it anymore. He also removed the shield durability, so we can block forever. Don't mind this change really. In the first game my shield broke maybe twice in a single playthrough, so it was never this thing you had to manage or even pay attention to at all. Oh, and also with how fights and enemies are set up in this game, the whole thing about spacing, positioning, and timing is no longer needed. Just swing away. Looking at the HUD, it's the same thing as before. Each segment represents the durability of each layer. But there's a nice little quality of life change with these. So whenever we pick up a new armor piece, it'll fully heal you. While in one, you kept your current health as low or high as it was, and just added an extra bar beneath it. In the sequel, everything gets refilled. Gold armor is back, but it's more of a cosmetic thing now. So no timer, no new attacks, no iframes, doesn't let you pass through stage hazards, and so on. Beneath that, this orange bar is our super meter. This is used by those for thrust attacks and the shield toss. This little meter around the center icon is no longer tied to weapon buffs. Instead, it's our DT pretty much, allowing us to play as Grim for a bit. And he lets us quickly glide from enemy to enemy, deal some big damage with our far-reaching attacks, and we'll have complete iframes the entire time too. So just dump damage as much as you can before this meter drains. It's also somewhat exploitable, but we'll get into that during a future boss fight. When it comes to upgrades, we have shops now. So throughout every level we have these guys to buy some moves. And you'll find out pretty quick that the whole losing abilities on death is entirely gone. Which means everything you buy are permanent additions to your move list. So there's no longer this risk-reward custom move list going on. We have to plan out which abilities to lock down that are best suited to your playstyle. But yeah, it's the usual stuff. Get the better shield toss, better ground pound, extend the grim meter, and so on. These get pretty expensive, but that makes sense now that we never lose them, right? But when compared to 1, you'll get flooded with money, so you get a few of these with ease. They also add some random NPCs in every stage. Most times they're being attacked from enemies, so just mash away to save them. Then they'll give you either money, health, keys, or even hints to find hidden chests. And oh yeah, death coins. So instead of being used for continues, they effectively replaced lives. So the exponential death penalty has been taken out. And to be honest, I never once got a game over like I did a lot when learning 1. And that's because this game is noticeably less demanding for starters. But also, it's pretty easy to get a hold of a lot of these coins. So you'll be more than fine in this sequel. Oh, and another thing, they removed the hub structure. So we don't have this central area that we always return to, where we could pick which stage we want to play and in what order. Now it's a more standard set line. Since the hub has been scrapped, saves are no longer paywalled either. Now you can save for free. I would say that wasn't needed to remove, but I get why it was done. All in all, they did make some pretty massive changes to the original formula. A lot of it in the name of easier onboarding, with the less punishing death system, and removing the pay to save feature. Think that's not too bad for a game of this length, but my main issue now is that they removed all challenge while they were at it. Now that was completely unnecessary. The first game is a perfect example of how to combine combat with platforming, then build off those ideas with different layouts, gimmicks, and formations. But here in the sequel, there's just nothing worth mentioning. We already saw how combat has been simplified, but so has the platforming. There's just no clear gimmick or as strong of an idea like 1 for them to build off from. Sucks too because controlling Maximo has been drastically improved. He runs faster, coyote jumps are a thing now, and we also have a ledge grab to save ourselves from pits. They could have used this to push the envelope a bit more and craft some really awesome stages with these new mechanics in mind. But they really didn't. The only time it gets interesting was in the last 2 or so stages of the game. Yeah, the 2 core concepts that the first game masterfully blended together since minute 1 has been reduced to have no pushback. When it comes to enemies, the basic grunts are pushovers. You can just match without much hassle. They do jump back, and for a second, I thought they would do a forward lunge attack to punish our reckless swings, something similar to the Abyss from DMC3, but nah, not really, so just keep doing what you're doing. Now the only solid enemy in the game are these Rock'em Sock'em robots, and that's because they fight back and have their own defensive option to look out for. So they will either toss out this little combo, ending with an uppercut, which leaves them in end lag for us to punish afterwards, or they'll pull back a bit before tossing out a forward jab. Just guard this and follow up soon after. Now they do have hyper armor, so it's an enemy that punishes mashing for once. But as long as you're ready to pick up on the patterns, guard, and counterattack, he's a fun enemy. There's also dogs, and these aren't half bad either. Think you only see them once or twice in the entire game though. So they do have the same jump back to escape your combos, and will actually rush in with a few swipes. But they don't have reach to that attack of theirs, so they're easily snuffed out without much precision on your end. So mashing away isn't half bad still. There's little spiders that swarm you. Even though they are at ankle height, our regular standing attacks still hit them. And that's because a crouch attack has been removed. So there's no high-low hitbox stuff going on like in 1. Which means just mashing that multi-hit combo will get rid of them. And since there's always a crowd too, the ground pound works pretty damn great on them and even flips them over for an easy follow-up. There's scarecrows that go in for a command grab, so keep them at bay with constant swipes. Just watch out for that exploding head of theirs when they die. Near the end of the game, we fight some Maximo clones. And yeah, same thing. Just mash lights and you'll win. Man, this enemy could have been way more fleshed out than this. Maybe they could have been more like the shield skeletons from 1 at the very least, where they consistently punished you for attacking when it wasn't your turn. They could have done something, you know. Yeah, I'm sure you can tell, enemies are definitely simplified in this game, and are no longer distinct as before. So don't expect these unique enemy groupings, because there's not much difference between them. And you want to know what's funny? There's technically more enemies here than the first game, but sure doesn't feel like it. And that's because they no longer require their own unique approach. In the sequel, we don't have a single clever enemy like the pirates, for example, where it's pretty neat how we have to take them down in a specific way. There's just nothing like that here. Not to mention the bare bones level design that really stunted any or all chance to repurpose them to create all these different scenarios. Sucks they're underdeveloped because I do like their new theme of having these robotic enemy designs. I think they could have done a lot with this idea. Would have been interesting to create new enemies to put those vertical and horizontal attacks to some real use this time. And if they did, we could have had a game that leans more into this specific hitbox sort of combat system. Maybe some sort of limb removal system where it'll change the patterns depending on what we cut off. This could have led to some creative enemies, but what we got wasn't much. Yeah, it's definitely a fall from grace from the first game. When it comes to boss fights, the first one backs up a lot most times. So just run up and do a regular aerial combo, which topples them over. Then getting close to land a few easy heavy attacks. Eventually, it'll put its face away and run at you, doing a few back and forth charges. Just run to the side and make harsh turns to have him overshoot. Surprisingly, there's a second form. This is a nice improvement over 1 for sure. But yeah, he reveals those mounted miniguns. It'll still hang back most of the fight, so just make your way, but this time while being shot at. Since our shield can't be broken or take any chip damage, just run up, guard, run up again, and yeah, guard again. Or you can even do some zigzag movements to avoid these shots too. The second boss starts off with this little set piece, destroying bits and pieces of this house as we chip away at it. Pretty simple, but damn cool to see. Same thing as before, we want to do some aerial combos. Once you do, it'll hide its eye. But we can time our next aerial attack to hit him right as it recovers, which stops any attack of theirs from even coming out. For phase 2, we take things outside. The eye is still its weak point, but now it shields it. So we have to chip away at it to expose that weakness again. Can do a regular combo or even forward pokes to get that done. But once we land enough hits, be ready to block that beam of theirs. Now the third boss is one of my favorites of not just this game, but the entire series. And that's because it's a rival fight pretty much, so expect to see some similar moves as our own. Can tell you this right now, mashing won't get you far here, because he'll parry you every time. Instead, we need to pick up on his patterns, avoid him properly, and land a guaranteed punish during his end lag. So yeah, his fight really does have all the basics that made Nello Angelo, Virgil, or Credo work so well. Okay, so he has a solid set of moves we need to keep track of. There's his main combo that starts with 2 wide swipes, followed by 4 pokes. Or he'll do a ground pound of his own, sending out the shockwave, or a spin attack in place. These are the major options to look out for, so we can find our openings. But it won't end there, because after every punish we land, he'll answer back with this summon attack. Pay close attention, because it'll either do a horizontal or vertical attack, which, yeah, also leaves him vulnerable afterwards. And that's it. What a great fight. This boss just really shows what this combat system can do, and I wish we saw more of this here in the sequel. The fourth boss is this Hydra looking thing. This fight is pretty interesting, because as things goes on, it'll destroy the playing field. So it adds this sort of stays hazard gimmick to the mix, which has us rethink our positioning for once. But yeah, just pay attention to what set of panels are about to burst, and be quick to make your way there. Once the monster is out, it'll toss out a few attacks. You can run past them or just block as well. And yeah, same thing as most bosses. Do your full aerial combo, quickly block their counter attack, and repeat this until it takes off. Well, it's time to finally take down the big bad. The classic strat works here too. Jump, full aerial combo, which will knock open that chest of theirs to expose his weak spot. From there, use the forward thrust attack. It's kind of our best follow-up since it'll quickly close the gap with an attack. Keep doing this until he kneels down. Now this is our cue to stop and guard as fast as you can to block his AoE burst attack. And once you do that, yeah, return to the same plan afterwards. Also, if things are getting out of hand with all those little minions filling the room, just DT to clear them out instantly. For phase 2, he'll use those nearby enemies as a power-up. But still, the same attack loop is our go-to. Now the only change is to his AoE attack. It's no longer blockable, so instead, pop DT for those iframes. and turn it off soon after. This is pretty strong because there's no initial cost to start or even leave this form. A small tick will drain in that small moment when active, but other than that, we can chain iframes without risk or loss of resources. Even DMC1 knew this would have been too strong and had a price to entering and leaving DT. Not here though. Yeah, use that to your advantage and we'll just delete that health bar of his in no time. Now once we take him down, that's actually not all. Because just like the first game, we have ourselves an extra fight right at the end. And well, look who it is. So Killy makes a last minute appearance. So all he does is teleport away. Just make your way in and land some regular attacks. You'll notice that no damage is actually being dealt, but we are getting our DT filled with every hit we land. So yeah, the gimmick here is to land attacks, build as much meter as possible, and use Grim to open him up to deal some real damage. But to stop us from doing that, he will toss out the occasional magical attack from fireballs and this beam of lightning. But just like most attacks, we can easily block both of them without issue. So it's pretty similar to the first boss a bit, while using that electric attack from the second boss too. But yeah, not a bad fight. Doesn't live up to the first game's final boss, but still, not half bad. And that's Maximo versus Army of Zin. It's okay. Many things that make Ghost of Glory such an incredible game has taken a back seat here in the sequel. So don't expect any interesting layouts to learn and overcome. It's pretty light in that regard. The game just doesn't do much interesting with platforming till the very end, so don't expect some really thought out encounters that made one stand out. And for combat sections, all we get are these pretty cookie cutter arena-like setups to fight waves of enemies till the game says we can proceed. It's a lot more basic than the first game. The entire game in general was simplified in every way. Enemies aren't as layered anymore, our kit was expanded upon, but it's no use when enemies are this unengaging. The ledge hang and coyote jumps are a really nice assist, but they reduce platforming by quite a lot in comparison, so there's no real point to have them. So it has weaker enemy design, weaker level design, and weaker encounter design too. Now I know I hold the first game in such high regard, so unless the sequel did everything absolutely the same and more, then yeah, poor Army of Zin just didn't stand a fighting chance to impress me, sadly. Well, the bad news doesn't end here, because the devs of these games wanted to make a third one, which hey, more the merrier. But that's not all, because at the same time, the Japan team was planning to make a similar game, and it was called Magical Ninja Jiraiya. By the looks of it, it was going to be in the same style of Maximo, but instead of playing as an ironclad knight in this dark fantasy horror setting, we'll be playing as a ninja slashing away all sorts of yokai. No, this would have been so cool. You guys know how much I like these games with heavy use of Japanese mythos, so I would have been all for this. Sadly, it seems like it's never going to come out now, and is locked away for good. Seems like the low sales of both Maximo games sealed the fate of any future projects tied to or around the name. But just like most of Capcom's more experimental games without much mass market appeal, they get canned almost immediately. Try not to be too pessimistic about things right now, but with being pretty bummed out by the sequel, having to think about what could have been with that Ninja spinoff, and to really rub it in, realizing that nothing changed for over 20 years. I suppose that's just how things work out sometimes. Well, most times.